I have a problem. Engine night.
Now, qualifying was an absolute disaster for Verstappen, but man did it make for an intriguing grid come Sunday.
And the Saudi Grand Prix is go!
The pole position favourite had a total shocker, dropping out at the Q2 stage because of some janky driveshaft failure. Talk about bad luck, right? But here's where things get really juicy. Verstappen's RB19 got fixed up and he was ready to charge its way through the field from P15. And guess what?
Great recovery, well done.
He didn't disappoint. Within no time, he rose up to second place, hot on the heels of his teammate Perez. It was like watching a masterclass in racing, as Verstappen showed us all what true grit and determination looks like on the track. Now, everyone was expecting big things from Verstappen in qualifying, especially after he had dominated the timesheets in all 3 practice sessions. I mean, this guy was on fire. But then in the second part of qualifying, he suddenly came over the radio complaining about some gnarly engine problem.
It's almost not accelerating.
And just like that, he was limping his way back to the garage. And because of the issues, he could only manage 15th fastest in qualifying, which means he's going to have to start the race on the 8th row. Verstappen was on the radio with his team, expressing his suspicion that something was up with his engine. However, after reviewing a replay, Sky pundit Martin Brundle threw a curveball by suggesting that it could actually be a problem with the driveshaft. This left everyone scratching their heads, wondering what was really going on with Verstappen's car. "I have a problem, engine a problem," he said over the radio. He then added, "It's not accelerating." Well, it turns out that this wasn't the first time Verstappen had experienced issues with downshifts. Just 2 weeks prior in Bahrain, he was plagued by a similar problem. And to make matters worse, this problem reared its ugly head once again during Friday practice in Jeddah. In an effort to prevent any further setbacks, the team made the decision to swap out the gearbox on his car. Now, since the incident, Red Bull confirmed that the issue plaguing Verstappen's car was not with the engine after all, as Brundle initially suspected, but with the driveshaft. Speaking to Sky, Verstappen revealed that this was the first time he's ever heard of such a driveshaft issue. He's understandably peeved that this has happened, especially given that he's had an exceptional weekend up until this point, with every single session going swimmingly.
What was the problem with the car?
Yeah, it was a drive shaft which broke, so...
Nonetheless, Verstappen has got his head in the game and knows that it's all about scoring points, even if that means clawing his way to the front from further down the grid. He's acutely aware of the unpredictability of this track and acknowledges that anything can happen out there. However, he's also realistic about the challenge ahead, admitting that it's going to be an uphill battle. But with the strong pace of his car, he's confident that he'll be able to surge ahead in no time. Verstappen, however, remains determined to take the checkered flag despite starting from a measly 15th position on the grid come Sunday. And if we take a look back in time, in 2008, Fernando Alonso started from 15th and managed to win.
Fernando Alonso coming through to take the checkered flag.
But that win since then is dubbed Crashgate, the most controversial win. Alonso and Piquet both qualified poorly for F1's first night race, with Alonso starting 15th and Piquet starting 16th. Alonso pitted early on in lap 12 and rejoined the field at the back. Less than 3 laps later, Piquet crashed in a section of the track where debris cannot be quickly removed.
At Houston. Oh, big crash! That's Nelson Piquet.
Due to pit stop strategies and the safety car, most of the leading cars ended up behind Alonso, who had gained an advantage. Both Briatore and Simmons attributed the safety car deployment to good luck, but some were suspicious of the incident. It's hard to believe that any driver would crash on purpose, but it happened. But in August 2009, Piquet was abruptly released by Renault, prompting him to speak about the true cause of his crash. He claimed it was a deliberate act orchestrated by the team. After weeks of speculation, Renault was charged with conspiracy.
He says he was asked to crash on purpose by engineering chief Pat Simmons and Flavio Briatore.
Initially, the team denied all charges and was set to contest them in court, but then, in a complete 180, Renault admitted their guilt and two top executives, Flavio Briatore and Pat Symonds, resigned. At the FIA hearing, Renault was disqualified from F1 and handed a 2-year suspension. Briatore was banned indefinitely from all Formula 1 events and FIA-sanctioned events, while Symonds received a 5-year ban. Both bans were later overturned by a French court, but the two agreed not to work in Formula 1 or FIA-sanctioned events as part of a settlement with the governing body. But what has this got to do with Verstappen? Well, he also started 15th, but no intentional crashes were involved this time, and he almost won and broke Alonso's record. Everything was fair this time as he finished behind his teammate Perez.
The answer across the line is Max Verstappen, who takes the final lap.
Nonetheless, the race was amazing and Verstappen had an insane comeback at the Grand Prix. He started all the way back in 15th place, but managed to claw his way up the leaderboard, picking up 4 places in just the first few laps. By lap 10, he had already made it into the points, which was a major achievement considering how far behind he had started. And then, just when things were really heating up, Lance Stroll's car went kaput on lap 17, bringing out the safety car.
But we've got a yellow flag in sector 2.
Verstappen took advantage of the situation and pitted, emerging in 4th place on the soft tyres. Could he make up the ground he had lost earlier in the race? Well, you better believe he tried. The defending world champion put the pedal to the metal and overtook both George Russell and Fernando Alonso, zooming all the way up to 2nd place.
He checks the mirror and watches Max Verstappen go past Verstappen.
From there, it was a matter of whether he could catch up to his teammate Perez, who was leading the pack. But Perez was one tough cookie and he managed to hold off Verstappen's advances. Despite a slow start that saw Alonso charge into the early lead, Perez found his rhythm and kept his cool, leading the bulk of the Grand Prix.
Formula 1, Sergio Perez wins. It's Perez on top at the Saudi Arabia.
Sergio Perez managed to snag the win, but unfortunately it wasn't enough to nab him the top spot in the World Championship. Max Verstappen was a real wild card, stealing the fastest race lap and throwing a serious spanner in the works. Perez was pretty candid about the whole thing, telling Viaplay, "I was expecting to dominate, but then the safety car came out and made things way harder than they needed to be. It brought Max right into the race and gave us a real run for our money." And let me tell you, those last 25 laps were a real game of inches. Verstappen and Perez were neck and neck, with each driver pushing the other to go 1/10 faster, 1/10 faster. It was a battle royale out there, and it was definitely keeping everyone on the edge of their seats. But in the end, it was Verstappen who managed to steal the extra point for the championship, leaving Perez feeling pretty disappointed. Apparently, he'd been given some information that he wasn't allowed to push any harder, which made things even more frustrating. "I don't have enough information at the moment," Perez explained diplomatically. "It's something we'll have to review with the team." Verstappen was far from pleased with his 2nd place finish, admitting he was not there to merely get 2nd.
I think 2nd is of course great, but that's not what I'm here for, after the...
Despite his protests, the Dutch driver knew that, with or without the safety car, it was the highest possible result he could achieve. He described the race's opening laps as really hard to follow cars due to the street circuit, fast corners and close walls, yet his pace was still good enough to pick off rivals one by one. And everyone noticed his reaction when Perez celebrated with his team, the Dutchman staring determinedly straight ahead as the Mexican hugged his crew just inches away. And the rest of us looked to the pair's radio messages in the final stages of the race. And during the final moments of the race, there were some interesting messages in the Red Bull box. Perez was given a target time of 1:33 and asked what time was Max doing. Red Bull replied 1:32.6. Perez then asked why did they give him 1:33, and after that Verstappen was closing on Perez, ignoring calls to maintain the 1:33 time. Perez said, "We're pushing without a reason," after being told the team couldn't slow the Dutchman. Perez kept the gap and Verstappen changed his strategy in the final stages. "What's the fastest lap?" he asked after a long radio silence. "Max, we're not worried about that right now." "Yeah, but I am," he stormed. setting the fastest lap of the race and taking the championship lead from his teammate who had been fastest until then. Red Bull have a situation with Perez and Max that might need to settle. They had a similar incident last year in Brazil where Verstappen refused to yield to Perez. Verstappen snapped over the radio and said, "I told you already last time," he snapped at the time. "You guys don't ask that again to me, okay? Are we clear about that? I gave my reasons and I stand by it." Nevertheless, this was an amazing race from both Max and Perez. Max nearly broke the record held by Alonso, but at least he snatched the point from fastest lap to be first at the leaderboard. So, what are your thoughts on this? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe.